Okay, good evening, everyone. This is John Haller with our next Prophecy Roundtable on technocracy, transhumanism, technology, AI, and all things related to tech, mark of the beast technology, and all of those sort of things. I'm joined tonight by a number of my friends. Hang on just a second here. My camera is not in the right position, of course. My staff failed me. So, I'm joined tonight by David Bowen from the Phoenix area, Scott Townsend, Tom Hughes, Patrick Wood, and Britt Gillette. And we're going to talk through some of the issues that are in this area. We were talking beforehand that we used to actually exchange long outlines, and then we never got through more than a half a page of them. So I think we just sort of all collectively gave up doing that. There's a lot going on in this space. It is Bible prophecy related. And I will say this, we have moderators. They do watch what people are saying. We would appreciate if you would not try to promote your ministries or other teachings and stuff that we haven't had a chance to vet. Those will probably be deleted. Play nice in the chat. The moderators will try to do a good job of policing what's going on there. But we will make mistakes at times, and we apologize for that. So everybody, good evening. And I think where we want to start with Britt, why don't we start with you? And because you've talked a lot in the past about replicator technology, and this week there was a rather significant, I guess it was about a week ago, Zelensky from Ukraine came out and said that Ukraine had been using robots in the field in Ukraine and had actually taken some land back using those robots. So why don't you kind of start us off on that conversation about the use of this technology in war?
Sure. Well, we've really seen this come to the forefront in the last, say, 4 years, starting with the Russia-Ukraine war. But we've also seen this deployed in battlefields that Israel's faced since October 7th, as well as what we're seeing right now with the Iran war. So we've seen how drones have completely transformed conventional warfare. We're really in the early innings, very rudimentary, crude drones. So think of World War I and the transition from cavalry to mechanized war, and what that sort of looked like. Maybe some of those early tank warfare of World War I. It's sort of laughable if you go back and look at some of those things. That's really where we're at right now. And probably the cutting edge of all of this is the Russia-Ukraine war, because they've been at this for 4 years and it's a matter of survival. And so you're going to innovate constantly on the battlefield. And what we have seen so far and what we're going to see as we go through time here very rapidly and exponentially is we're going to see how these weapons change in real time. The days of decade-long procurement cycles for defense technologies are over. Those days are over. So the post-World War II system we've had here in the United States is antiquated in comparison. And we still see certain moves to create countermeasures to drones using that antiquated system. Where everything is going is toward developing software and AI to onboard the cheap technologies that can be innovated in real time on the battlefield. So we saw back in January, Pete Hegseth put out a memo where he talked about taking battlefield intelligence and transforming it into weapons on the battlefield in a matter of hours rather than years. And that just sort of got pushed to the wayside by much of the media. We didn't hear much talk about that, but that's where all of this is going. So the cheap mass deployment of AI-powered drones is where all of this is headed. Now, as far as the replicator initiative, again, the purpose of that was to deploy air, sea, and land-based drones at scale simultaneously in one venue. They've worked toward that, but ultimately, where all of this is going is you need a manufacturing technology that allows the relatively inexpensive mass production of drones in real time on the battlefield. And that's where molecular manufacturing comes in. We've talked about that in the past. I believe that's ultimately where all this is going. And it will eventually overturn the doctrine of mutual assured destruction. The nuclear deterrence will become obsolete. And so that's sort of an idea of where we are right now. We're already seeing on the battlefield in Ukraine AI-powered autonomous drones in small swarms that are given a target, and they lock in on that target even if the ability of the Ukrainians who are operating those systems, if that communication line is severed in some way by jamming or whatever it may be that the Russians deploy, they're able to still carry out the mission autonomously through AI, and it's been very successful so far. So again, this is just early moments, but this is a dominant battlefield practice already, and we're only going to see this reach whole new levels in very short order in a matter of months and years, not decades or centuries. So this is the way battles and wars will be fought going forward.
Britt, did you see that report where they were flying a drone over one of the battlefield cities, and draped on the roofs were hundreds of fiber optic wires that are being used to launch the drone, and under a actual physical connection to the drone, they're commanding where it's going through a pilot. And then when they're done, the drone blows up. It severs that, that link. It doesn't need to be navigated anymore. But what struck me with that was it looked like spider webs all over the houses. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Oh, it was really something. Yeah.
Britt, how different is this software they're using with the drones than what they have with the Gen 5 fighters? I mean, the world now is seeing different type of aircraft being used as well, and it's all using AI. So it's in real time, and they're having opportunities to do things. Is that software different than what they're using in the drones now, or is it very similar? Are you aware of that?
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question.
I have an image of the. Let me pull this up here real quick. This is a field in Ukraine, and I don't know if you can see it. That the reason they're using fiber optics is because the Russians, and this is also true from Russia, vice versa. They can jam the drones on the Wi-Fi technology that's used to control them. So they've developed these. I don't know where they get all the fiber optic cable to do this, but I've seen whole villages and towns just covered with these fiber optic, as Scott said, spider webs.
It's invisible until the light hits it just right. And then it kind of, makes it very visible.
Yeah, but if they do hundreds of drones, you have hundreds of fiber optic trailers. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know who cleans this mess up after the battle or the war, or if they do, but I think it's a big problem. But maybe we could address a little bit the issue of what do I want to say? The robots that are being used in Ukraine right now against Russia. And it seems to be one way right at the moment. And it is sort of changing the battlefield.
The one thing I saw was a half-track looking, small 4x4 type of thing. It looked like it was bigger than a golf cart. It was armored, by the way. So it weighed quite a bit, and it had multiple tires on it. And that was being steered through remote control, but it was only being used for retrieving bodies and wounded off the battlefield. So it was ambulatory. It wasn't I don't know that it had weapons mounted on it, but that's certainly, Britt, we see, examples where they're mounting, different types of weapon systems on these remote controlled drones, right?
Sure. Yeah, they've used drones similar to what you're talking about that can go across land for, reconnaissance, and as well
Right.
as to exploding munitions on the battlefield to take out different enemy positions. So, yeah, that's been going on for several years at this point.
Yeah, what Zelensky said last week was that for the first time in this war's history, this is reported in the New York Post, an enemy position was taken exclusively by unmanned platforms and drones.
Yeah.
The occupiers surrendered, and this operation was completed without infantry involvement and without losses on our side. And so the point of the article is, Putin went in there thinking he's going to overwhelm Ukraine, and Ukraine has been pretty innovative in putting these things together. And I guess what I don't understand, and maybe you guys, how are they doing it in the midst of a war? Is it coming from somewhere else? Is there something going on behind the scenes that we don't know? Is this a laboratory for bigger picture things that we're not really seeing? I'm just not sure how they're manufacturing all this stuff in a country that has been decimated population-wise and with losses in the military over the last 4 years, but they're holding their own against a pretty significant military.
It's because they're getting supplied in large part by NATO, and a lot of this is spread out. It's decentralized. It's in people's homes and their kitchens and their garages, en masse across Ukraine, but also the whole of Europe. So Russia just last week put out a list of targets of drone manufacturing facilities in Europe, and Dmitry Medvedev threatened to hit those targets. He said European leaders shouldn't think they can sleep at night. So it's because NATO has been supplying a lot of intelligence, a lot of equipment, a lot of munitions, a lot of help to them, but it's also because of just the innovation that comes when your back's against the wall and you're fighting to survive, you're fighting for your family, you can get a lot done.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not understanding how they're doing that. I guess I've always been a logistics guy, so I kind of want to. Somebody's making this stuff someplace. Somebody's assembling these robots. Somebody's putting the chips and computer and communication system in these robots, and I'm just wondering, is like, where is this all coming from, and where is this all being done? And I know I've read articles where Ukraine is controlling these robots from hundreds of kilometers away. And what does this mean for warfare everywhere?
Well, I think necessity, as Britt has indicated, forces innovation, and the interviews I've seen of some of the commanders, including behind the scenes shots of these, call it a mini warehouse. They're not very big, but there are teams that are they're prosumer type engineering people. They don't have formal education, but they're doing a lot of printer stuff, right?
3D printing, right?
Yeah, 3D printing. They innovate, they talk, they break down. One of the really important things that they do, Britt, you could probably talk more about this, is that they're bringing a postmortem analysis of what is working and what is not working on the battlefield. And that's what they use to input into the next set of engineering specifications. And also, by the way, they have to make changes when the supply line changes a vendor because they can't get that part anymore. Or so they're adapting constantly to these conditions, and it is no different. In fact, it is really paralleling what happens in Silicon Valley with software development. There's telemetry that they're looking at. There's these discussions among, because they're seeing what's happening through the camera systems of these drones. And so they can say, well, we need to do this. This is too much weight. We need to reduce it by another 4 ounces. Whatever their postmortem analysis is, then they start innovating. And, it's pretty impressive how fast it's moving. And I saw a guy being asked, are the Russians also innovating? And he absolutely nodded. He said, yes, they are. And however, I don't think that Russia's capable of moving as fast as Ukraine right now, just out of pure desperation and necessity.
John, you make an interesting question about logistics, though, about where the stuff is coming from. Because I was over in Israel last fall. I was in a drone factory. We were actually purchasing a drone for one of the IDF units over there. And they were explaining that the parts they need come from China, but China won't ship to Israel. So China ships to Vietnam, Vietnam to Germany, Germany over to Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia to Israel. So what should take weeks takes months for Israel to get the parts. But the question logistically would be, would China send the parts to Ukraine? Because basically everybody's saying that's where the parts originate from, and everybody who's doing the drones needs the parts from China. So is China supporting Ukraine, or are they just selling the parts? That's logistically is a pretty good question.
The whole thing is kind of fascinating to me because I just don't, I order something from Amazon and every now and then it gets completely messed up, so I'm wondering, like, how do you get all this drone stuff delivered so you can take on a pretty big army? I'd like Tom and Dave to kind of weigh in on this one, because one of the things that's been happening with regard to the Zelensky has now gone to the Gulf countries, the Gulf Coast countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others that are being attacked by Bahrain and Oman, that are being attacked by
Iran,
and entering into agreements with them about, hey, we will come and help you with your technology. So, any thoughts on that?
Well, I have a hard time believing that Zelensky is still around, but it is what it is. When we look at the whole Ukraine situation, in my mind, John, it goes back to your question. Where's all the funding come from for that? The U.S., right? Most likely. And then who is really the mastermind that's behind it? What company is behind it? Who are the people that are behind it? It can't just be all Ukrainians that have built this system. And if Zelensky is going over and dealing with the Gulf states, there's no way, in my mind, he's going over there on his own. And it's a lot bigger deal. In my mind, I also go back to what Patrick wrote a few weeks ago about the whole IMEC deal and what is really going on. So if I'm thinking if Zelensky is involved with the Gulf states, it's a bigger deal than what meets the surface. The other thing, when I look at both Ukraine, the war there, and what's going on with Israel, we know they're learning by all of these wars. And if I go back to the time of the early stages of COVID, there's a learning process. Everything's going into a database, what worked, what didn't work, what got people on board, what kind of people were resisting. And they're just, everything in these wars, as you guys know better than I do, is all going into these databases. And with AI, it's collected, it's assimilated at an incredible pace. And we look at the robotic industry, everything I read about the robotic industry, it is the pace at the way robots are increasing in their abilities is astounding. But there has to be some groups that are behind it. I look at this through, was it Eisenhower that coined the term the military industrial complex? I can't remember who it was. John, you probably remember who it was. I'm sure you do also, Patrick. But I look at this, and there's no way in my mind Zelensky is just doing stuff all on his own. But at the same time, with everything that you guys are talking about, biblically, I go to the place of Revelation chapter 13, where when Antichrist rises to power, the world looks at him and says, who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? What's being developed right now is something that is going to be unstoppable. And that's what we are watching. It's like all of the data is being collected to be used to be able to develop better and better weapons. And the weapons that are being used in combat are going to be used against the masses to keep everybody in control too.
Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, but I will just say I've spent dozens and dozens of hours on the phone with people in Ukraine. And I know people are leaving and young guys are leaving. It's just like, there's a body drain in Russia. There's one in Ukraine. And I don't know how they're doing this. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I can't wrap my head around it. Maybe because it's like the wizard behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, And I'm just wondering who's doing all of this. Do you guys have any thoughts on who's doing this? And David, you can weigh in too. I didn't let you weigh in on that last question.
No, I think Tom answered it well. I mean, we want to go to logistics, first of all. When we look at that, we want to look at alignment, what nations are aligning, but I think it's more of the technical side that we need to keep our eyes on, because things are moving not only with alliance with other nations, but with technology and where it's going to end up being probably in a very short period of time.
So, I mean, I guess my question is, how far down the road do you think we are on these systems?
Well, there's I think in our mind, we always think of the Terminator, in our visual cortex and, slinging some kind of a weapon system, marching around, crushing skulls under his feet. And I just don't think that that's I don't know that that's in the very near term. I think when I look at the state of robotics, what I see is still very immature movement. And what I mean by that is there's unsteadiness, although it is getting better. The gait and the way that they're doing it. I saw a video with robots that are running in a race. They have a lane where the robot's running and they have a lane where humans are running. And the robots can go, fairly fast, much faster than they were a year ago. But I mean, I don't think that they're very stable still. I think the Boston Dynamic robots are quite stable. And they have remarkable degrees of freedom, so they can move in very weird ways. When you see like some of the robots that are knocked over deliberately during training, you should see how they get back up again. It is so freaky. It's totally disjointed how they do it, and they lift up and then they eventually right themselves. So from certain aspects, I think it's very formidable. But I think that there's a big, big gap still between a battlefield deployment of robots as we would think about it. I think it's more likely, as Britt has indicated, that it will be drones and other advanced warfare like lasers and things. I don't know. But I think the lowest hanging fruit aren't bipedals. They're quads. So it would be the dog robot shape, because they have 4 legs and they're much more stable than a 2-legged robot. So I think none of us would dispute the fact that this is coming. and most likely tribulation saints are going to have to deal with us at some point. I think that, teams of robots will go out and they will definitely be rounding up people, that aren't taking the mark, and who knows what's going to happen after that. But right now, I think it's still embryonic to some degree, but I'm really interested in your take on it.
I don't think you're allowed to use biological terms when talking about robots. Embryonic is, I'm just kidding.
Thank you for saying that, John.
Well, I just thought I would point that out.
What did I do wrong?
Smarter. Makes me feel smarter to do that. Okay. Well, let me ask you. So here's a news report. It's at NPR, of course, that we can believe that, right? But this was reported in the press just 2 days ago, yesterday or the day before. A humanoid robot won a half marathon race for robots in Beijing on Sunday, and it ran faster than the human world record in a show of China's technological leaps. And it shows the crowd. It ran a half marathon in a 13-mile race in 50 minutes and 26 seconds, beating the world record of 57 minutes. So about 6.5 minutes faster than a human had ever run, top athlete in the world had ever run a half marathon. The robot did this.
I think we're just at the beginning of that innovation stuff. Wait till they deploy wheels and they're not actually moving legs. I mean, it could just be very, very fast. I don't see why a robot can't do 100 miles an hour given the right architecture.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm sort of, I will confess to everybody, I'm sort of gobsmacked by all of this that I'm seeing this day by day by day by day, and it just keeps coming. So let me ask you this, and anybody can weigh in. How do you think this technology affects, say, something like Ezekiel 38 and 39 or other wars that are coming? So I saw a video that somebody did. I have no idea who this guy was. It just popped up in my feed, and I actually spent a few minutes watching it. And his point was, Ezekiel 38 and 39 talks about burying all the bodies and the feasting of the birds. So therefore, Ezekiel 38 and 39 has to happen before these robots become highly operational in a war setting. So anyway, so what impact do you guys think this is going to have on something like Ezekiel 38 and 39?
I'll say a couple things, and you guys say whatever you want, but there are different theories on how that's going to work out. There's many that think that in Ezekiel 38, or at least by that time, if not in that war, that a lot of the technological advances are going to be destroyed. So we wouldn't necessarily have, even if we advance and advance and advance with drones and robots, it could, those things could be destroyed. So you're going to be more dependent on men. And there's a lot of Bible teachers, prophecy teachers that also believe throughout the tribulation technology is going to become more and more hindered. I'm not necessarily one of the people that's of that camp, because there's a mark of the beast that's implemented that requires great technology all the way through to the end, and where nobody can make war against the beast. But certainly that is one possibility. And then, the other problem is, when does Ezekiel 38 actually happen, John, based on that question? I don't know if the person was inferring that too, because the weapons are burned for, 7 years, I think?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not sure. And that's one thing that I've never, we always say, well, that must be nuclear or something like that.
Yeah, so if the weapons are burned for 7 years for whatever reason, and it's people in Israel that are burning the weapons, then how is it that at the midpoint of the tribulation, when Antichrist turns against the people of Israel, specifically in Israel, how are they still there burning the weapons? So, I mean, there's a lot of different questions. I don't think we necessarily can say this is it. And at the same time, I'll throw this out too. I do not believe the way the Bible tells us things end during that last 7-year period. We're going to be entering into a time like it was with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Terminator. And all of the technology that we watch right now with robotics looks like it's going that direction and going there soon. So I just don't think it's actually going to reach to that point by the time the tribulation begins.
Yeah, for the record, Tom, I agree with you. I don't think it's going to get that far. I think there'll be significant disruption to the technical and developments at some point. I mean, with the rapture occurring and all these people gone, the massive disruption, the great reset. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going to begin to impede. And so I also agree that it's hard to kind of think about how far will all of this actually get.
I'll
Joe,
take a.
Joe,
Oh,
go ahead, Britt.
oh, you can go ahead. You're fine.
Well, so
Go
I
ahead,
got a
David.
show coming out on Friday about war. Is very interesting because if you look in the dictionary, war will say it's a military conflict between nations. But when I did some deep diving on that, where the root word comes from, it's European, and the root word means to mess up or to deceive. And when Jesus said you're going to hear of wars and rumors of war, obviously we think it's going to be military conflict. But what if it's what if it's emotional war or a spiritual attack, a cyber war, all different types of war that we have where we're being deceived. So I think we talk about war in the end times, and not just military conflict with technology there, but it will be cyber war. It will be individuals. It will affect everybody in all different aspects of life. So I think the war topic and the war issue goes a lot deeper than just a military conflict between nations.
That's a really good point, David.
Brett, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm going to probably take a sort of the opposite approach. I think as we near the second coming of Jesus at the end of the tribulation, we're going to see technology rapidly, exponentially advance right up until that moment. So I think what we're seeing today is nothing compared to what's coming. I don't think we're going to see the types of images that the Terminator movies put out. But the reason I think that, and I've stated this position for a long time, is we have transhumanists who are often the ones designing these technologies, and they want to merge with these technologies. And you mentioned earlier using embryonic and biological terms. There's a whole field of drone development called biomimetic drones. And they are drones that are copies of God's design. So Satan loves to counterfeit. And as Scott pointed out, you're going to build weapons that are the most efficient on the battlefield. So it's not as efficient to have a two-legged humanoid robot versus a robot dog. There are drones that are mimic fish and are really indistinguishable to the human eye from fish. And we see drones that mimic mosquitoes and locusts and bees and all sorts of other creatures we find in nature. And so as we see this, the exponential advance of these technologies, the onboarding of AI onto these technologies, and then the key is the ability to manufacture these drones at mass scale inexpensively, then those could be deployed, and there really would be no way to stop that. As Tom pointed out, the people of the world will marvel and say, who can make war against the beast? And I think this merging of humanity with its technology, the transhumanist agenda, it should really make us pause and wonder, is that what Jesus was referencing when he said, unless those days are shortened, no flesh would survive? Because we have Ray Kurzweil, who has a pretty good record of predicting technological progress. He says by the year 2050, humans will be software-based. So if that's true, then that tells us how close we are to seeing all of these events take place, along with, of course, the signs that Jesus and the prophets pointed to. So I don't see us, I personally don't see any sort of slowing down or stopping of this rapid technological progress, I see an acceleration.
A counterpoint to that, Britt, because I find that fascinating, is when the elites talk about transhumanism, that is the 0.1% of the world. That's not for the common person. So they're making these investments for their own benefit. And I don't see that they're willing to scale it out to give it to humanity. They want the power and the augmentations and the new capabilities to be retained among the elite class. And therefore, I don't know how far some of this will scale, just because I think they don't want to give the enablement of these things to the common meat eater, right?
I agree.
So talk about class warfare. We haven't seen anything like this in history, most likely.
So I want to hear from our technocracy expert, Patrick Wood. He's been studying this for a long time. Patrick, how far is this going to go?
Far. Really, really far.
A man of few words. Okay.
Well, look,
Now, I mean, expand on that a little bit.
let me just tell you about trends here. I forecast trends. My website, Technocracy News and Trends, that tells you why I do that. We've known for several years that the trajectory of technology has increased geometrically. We also saw this predicted in Alvin Toffler's book, Future Shock, and I think it's somewhere around 1970, where he predicted there would be a time in the future where humans would not be able to perceive what's going on with technology. That it'll appear to them to be magic, and there'll be no comprehension of what's going on. And we're at that point almost. And you alluded to this, I think. I feel the same way, by the way, John. When your mind spins or your head spins, and you look around all this stuff. Well, this is future shock in motion, I think. Where it could go from here, we don't know, but we know people like we've known for years. For instance, the military and the organizations like DARPA and the CIA, they've had technologies that they never released to the public or are never used. In other words, they always held something back that nobody knew about. Well, this cycle is being compressed at this point. They used to talk, well, it was 40 years, then 20 years, now 5 years, maybe 1 year, where these new advances are coming out to market, if you will. And most people can't understand what's going on at all. That's just the fact of it. So where's it going to go? Well, it's almost subjective at this point. The people who are prosecuting this whole system for the devil, I would add, this is the system that belongs to the God of this world. He knows he has an idea where this is going to go. People are executing his plan. Are they not divinely inspired, but demonically inspired to invent stuff and do stuff that nobody's thought of before? Probably, you have to figure. So, we have to look at this in one sense from the top down. It's really hard to do that, but getting involved in the particulars, often we miss the big picture. And so when we struggle, well, this drone technology, that drone technology, fiber optic drones, I mean, this is all cool stuff. Individually, it's cool stuff. You could spend an hour or a day just researching one aspect of this. You might be entertained and you might come away with a nice idea, but overall, there's no way that we can individually understand everything that's going on. That's kind of my point. So we're trapped in a system now where acceleration has become a feature of the system. And acceleration, we already know what acceleration means. Well, I made this benchmark by thumb, not scientifically, but I took the first quarter of last year when Trump got in office, and I said, well, how much will AI advance until Trump gets out of office, right? That's probably a good question. So at that point, AI was doubling about every 4.5 months. It's still on this trajectory right now. Probably some aspects might slow down, maybe others will pick up. There could be breakthroughs along the way that just accelerate the thing to the moon. But if this trajectory holds up, it's kind of like Moore's law, transistors that can fit on a chip. If this process of doubling every 4.5 months continues, by the time Trump is out of office, AI will have increased some 30,000 times where it is right now. This is inconceivable. It really is. I did the statistic, and how can we even conceive what AI will be able to do in 4 years from now, or 3 years from now? It's inconceivable.
So
this,
Patrick, let me ask you this. I mean, do you think that this development, I mean, we used to talk about Moore's law, right? That was like doubling every 2 years, I think.
18 months.
Okay, 18 months. And that's kind of been blown out of the water now on the AI side, right? 4.5 months instead of 18 months.
Well, we're not talking about chip design only for AI, and AI, that part of that cycle is wrapped up in the chip design, but it's not about the chip design. It's about the capabilities of AI in the first place.
It's the model.
Right, but it's the networking or joining together all of these chips, like NVIDIA chips in a big system.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't get more and more on a small chip. They just put a whole bunch of chips together in a way that they've never really done before. But my question is, you've watched these guys for a long time, and I'd like all you other guys to weigh in too. Do you think that where we are right now has exceeded their expectations thus far?
That's a great question. Some people at the top, I think, would say this is all beyond their expectations. Especially people like Mark Andreessen, who's a huge fan of accelerationism. That's a philosophy, by the way. That's not just saying, well, he wants to accelerate everything. Accelerationism posits that if you get your hands off technology and just let it run wherever it will go, that it'll break things along the way. But in the end, they say, well, we'll end up in utopia someday. That I don't believe that at all. But to somebody like Mark Andreessen, where acceleration is just crazy sped up right now, yeah, he's probably pretty happy with what's going on. Maybe the oligarchs in Washington, D.C., the tech oligarchs like David Sachs and Michael Kratsius and Howard Lutnick and people like that, maybe they're thinking, oh, this is really going well for them. Of course, they're all billionaires already. Where would they go other than become trillionaires, I guess, at some point? So the people at the top are probably pretty satisfied with what's going on. But there is trouble in River City. We need to remember that the AI build out with all these data centers, there's predictions on the street right now that says, probably 50 to 60% of all these data centers will not be completed in the end. That tells you something's going on here, but below the hype, if you will. That big giant facility that they're trying to build in Texas, called by a company called Fermi. They've broken ground on it. It's going to be the biggest data center in the world, and they couldn't score an anchor tenant at this point after 2 years of trying. Just yesterday or 2 days ago, the CEO and the CFO walked off the job. They just, we're out of here, man. This thing is crumbling. Well, that's not a good sign for, these data centers at this point. So, we look at it. Well, maybe there's enough data centers already just to control the whole world. That could be true. But they've been throwing all this money into these data centers like there's no tomorrow. And some of them are going to fail for sure. Fermi might be the biggest failure we've ever seen in the history of the world. So you have to balance progress against regression, I guess.
Yeah, no, I would say we've seen this pattern throughout history. So we saw with the dot-com bubble, we saw massive amounts of investment dollars that saw the promise of the internet, and they chased after it, and they overbuilt fiber optic networks, and they invested in all these companies that had no profits. We've seen it all the way back in the 19th century with railroads, and this just mass overbuilding of capacity before profitability. And I think we're seeing the same thing now. And when people read some of these stories, you shouldn't confuse poor business decisions or poor investment decisions with a failure of the technology, because railroads fulfilled their promise. The internet fulfilled its promise. I believe all of the things we've heard about AI, we're going to see these fulfilled through this technology as well. But that doesn't mean that today's companies that are investing in these products, creating these products, that they will be successful. Because, just look back at the dot-com bubble and all the companies that reach these stratospheric valuations, and how many of them are still even around today. Maybe eBay and Amazon, and that's about it. All these others were epic failures. New companies came up afterward, and those were many of the ones that succeeded. And so I think we're going to see that in due time. It's just a matter of that process playing itself out.
Guys, do you think that Elon will buy that out, when it gets discounted sufficiently?
Somebody will.
He probably will.
I've had clients in the past that I will just say, rich people tend to think differently than you and I. And I was with a client, and we were at a place where there was a resort. And somebody mentioned that it had been through 2 bankruptcies. And my client said, okay, now it's getting close to where the price I want to pay for the resort. So I think Elon would do this. Of course, we haven't even talked about what if they move these things into space? How does that factor into all of these?
Yeah, if you got a 10
Thanks.
cent on the dollar thing, though, John, I think that's pretty tempting.
What's that?
I said, if he could pick up something like that, 10 cents on the dollar, I think that's a compelling argument.
Sure. So, I'd like to hear, somebody made an interesting comment in the chat about, we're sort of like the guys in 12 Angry Men, the jury, where everybody's giving their perspective on everything. And we're the 6 angry prophecy guys. And, but I'd kind of like to hear Tom and Dave, and where do you think this is going to end up? How far are they going to get with this? I tend to agree with Britt, by the way.
I know where it's going to end up. It's going to end up glorious and fantastic. Because listen, the one thing that I think that people need to keep in mind, if you read your Bible, we know that this system that's being built, that's what's taking place. The system that's being built, it has a maximum shelf life when it's fully operational of 7 years. Maximum. That's like the shortest lived empire in the history of the world. So it's 6 angry men. I don't know of any of you guys being angry. But
we all just have different perspectives.
Yeah, we just have a different perspective. It's, I actually get quite joyful when I see all of these things develop, not because of the problems they're going to create for humanity, but because of what they point to. And I do think sometimes what happens, John, is you know this very well. We've had this conversation. Sometimes when it comes to the things like this that are really signs, because I look at this as signs of what's coming with the mark of the beast. The people get stuck at the sign and looking at it and going, oh my, what's going to happen? We forget the signs always point to something. There's a sign that points to, hey, bridge out. There's another sign that points to, hey, 5 miles down the road, it's your favorite restaurant. You don't stop where the sign is unless the bridge is out. Stop and turn around. But if you're going to a destination, which we are going to a destination, what do the signs point to? The great hope that we have. But as far as how far along this is going to go, quite frankly, I don't know, but it's obviously it's going to advance. I do believe that we're looking at digital ID and digital currency here in California. I just found out today there's some other insane things that are coming. I'll be able to talk about when I'm in Mississippi next week that have already started actually with technology, and it's the controlling of the masses of people. I don't want to get into it now unless we have time later on, but these things are coming, but we shouldn't get worried about them. But we do need to warn people because the warning sign points to the great news, and that's Jesus. But I'm curious as to what Dave thinks, because Dave puts an awful lot of thought into these things.
Well, it's interesting, Tom, because out in Arizona, in Phoenix, where I'm at, the whole idea of these centers, data centers being built is here. It's big in Nevada, it's big in Texas, it's big in Arizona because we have the land available. So I've been asking people, I've been doing research on this for about a year, asking why do we need these data centers? What's the end game? Where's it going to end up? Kind of the questions John was just asking. And what they're coming up against, what I'm being told is in order to do a data center, just one data center, they need about 2,000 acres per campus. So they got to find the land, but the land has to be flat, it has to be buildable, and it has to be near power, fiber optics. They don't want to have to put everything in themselves. It takes too much time and it slows them down. So finding the land is not easy. And then once they do that, the big hurdle they're coming up against is power, electricity. They were saying from the notes that I got from people I'm talking to, just one data center needs enough power to equal 100,000 homes. So the energy, the electricity and energy that could power 100,000 homes is what one data center needs in any of these states. To do a super data center like they want to do in Texas right now, that will power up more than an entire city, depending on the size city, but it could power an entire city. And that's about 3%. What's being done now at data centers is about 3% of all electricity around the globe, they're saying. So that's where all the power is coming from. The US data centers right now is using enough energy to power up 16 million homes, which is about 12% of all electricity we use in our states. So they're having trouble saying, how do we have enough energy and power to get these going? And as they start doing these data centers, it's going to get to the point where it's going to take more electricity than to power the entire country of Canada. So the enormous amount of what they need, the resources they need, they don't have the resources to do what they want to do. So that was a block to me. I said, well, what's the end game? Why are we even doing this then? Is it just technology? Is it just AI? And they're saying that basically they want to become a utility. They want to make sure that everybody is renting AI from them. So you and I won't buy AI. We won't invent AI. We will rent it. It will be a utility, much like our water and electricity is. So as we have utility bills, that's where AI is going to be. And what's going to happen is they want to take all these data centers and integrate them with smart cities, transportation, financial systems, digital ID. So the end game is to bring it all together. So now you see how it kind of dovetails together where we get to Revelation 13 and such. But the big problem is the land, and then they have zoning issues. They have to get the land zoned for this, and they're saying that once the land gets zoned properly, the land value jumps 3 times to 10 times what it was originally. So it takes home values and increases home values, but it makes it harder for people to afford homes. So it hurts people that way. It hurts people with utilities. and it basically takes up too much energy where it could drain basic cities from that. So there's a lot of hurdles to get through before we get there to where people want to get. But the end game is control. They want to be able to control that, where we have to go and rent and buy our AI and buy our utilities from them, or we can't run our businesses or run our homes. So it's interesting to say, where's it end up? Spiritually, as Tom said, we know where it ends up, but now we see how all the pieces are lining up and what they want to do. They want to control it, they want to own it, and they want to have reoccurring income with it, so that everybody is paying a monthly fee for services and such like that.
You know, Dave, this is interesting. Peter Zahan, in his book, it was from 2022, it's The End of the World is Just the Beginning. And he paints a really bleak picture because of the economic challenges that are coming because of artificial intelligence. And he basically says the people on the street, the common people, are going to get totally, we're going to get totally jacked in the process. And he points to all kinds of things like demographic collapses in China and other nations and all different sorts of things. But that's where he comes to. He goes, what people aren't understanding is the cost behind it, and what's going to happen to the general masses of humanity, while the people at the top are going to be protected.
That's exactly where it's going. What's happening with it? Everything from not being able to afford a home, to having monthly income for utilities, to having electricity cost more if you can get it. So there's a lot of hurdles that will be dangerous and harmful to the average person.
David, while we have you in the center there, I want to you teach at university, right?
Correct.
Which is it Grand Canyon?
It is.
Okay. So how are the young people reacting to all of this, or do they react to this, or what is it affecting them in any way?
They like the technology. They enjoy that. I did a whole teaching last year on the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, explained to them what Meta means, explained to them what it was doing, where it was going. And I just had a student come back to me just last week, actually. He is now doing an internship with the FBI. And he said, but you're going to be mad at me. And I said, why am I going to be mad at you? And he pulled out the Meta Ray-Ban's glasses and said, I bought these. You know, so the students are really excited about the technology and what they can do. They're not seeing the big picture. They're not understanding the big picture of where it all leads, or the privacy that you lose, the control that it gives other people, what it all ties into. They're not knowledgeable on that aspect of it.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments on what we've been talking about? See, when you really put the question to them, they all.
I think, you guys speak on this a lot more than I do.
Could you try again?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Go ahead. My phone is talking to me.
Oh, that's funny.
It's answering. It's acting like I want to ask yet a question. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, you entered in universal basic income. Britt, you've talked about that a lot. And how do you solve the problem for this stuff to move forward with people losing jobs, for one thing, because of AI, but also just the economic problems and challenges that it appears we're going to be hit with?
Yeah. I would encourage, well, I don't know if I would encourage people, if you want to see some really dark videos, there's a guy from the UK, I think he's from the UK, has a channel called Diary of a CEO. And I assume all you guys have seen these videos. And some of them are really pretty, I will say that when I watch them, I'm thrilled to death that I'm in my 70s. Because the chances that I'll be around for all of this is increasingly less day by day. But for example, the Harvard mathematician, is it Weinstein? Is that his name? Very smart guy, but he just said I could go on. I could play a string of clips for you guys, but I was just watching one. This is from a few months ago. He said, everything is over. I'm moving to Austin. It's over. I'm moving to Seattle. It's over. I'm moving to San Francisco. It's over. Silicon Valley. It's over. Nashville. It's over. And because this is changing employment and that type of thing. So maybe we could discuss this and go around the table a little bit. What do you think is the real impact? Because some guys say, oh, it's not going to have, I mean, I think Mark Andreessen is one who's kind of positive. It's going to create new jobs and that type of thing. But what are we looking at in the short term period of the impact on jobs and that type of thing? And how's it going to impact people?
I'll answer that question, I think, because I've been studying the economic side of this a lot these days. There's three aspects today of the effect of AI in the marketplace. One is when AI just can obsolete a job outright, somebody's going to get fired. That's probably maybe 20% or less of all the jobs being lost because of AI. Then there's another aspect of AI because as it infiltrates into companies and it replaces roles, not a whole job, but when you replace one certain role in a bunch of jobs, well, you have to collapse the whole pool at some point because those roles have been taken over by AI. Maybe a simple example would be managing your email, doing things like answering routine stuff for support or whatever. That's a role. That's not your only role. Most employees have at least probably 20, 30 different roles they perform. So that's another thing. If you have a bunch of roles being replaced, then you have to shrink the whole pie, and that sheds jobs. Then the bigger aspect right now is the misallocation of capital, because companies, big ones and little ones, they figured out they have to invest capital money. That's seed money. That's their foundation type money, not the operational money. They have to invest capital into these resources for AI. Well, there's not enough money to go around to pay people at that point, so they're shedding jobs just based on that alone. They're looking at their budget, say, we have to spend all this capital, but that doesn't leave enough money for the employees at that point, so they shed a bunch of jobs. Well, this is happening all over the world right now, especially in the tech industry. I think just in the last 3 months has shed at least 250,000 jobs. It's been really huge. And other companies are experiencing this as well. Sometimes they say, well, it wasn't because of AI per se, but when you consider, well, okay, they ran out of money to pay employees because they invested wrongly over here on these other bets, that's the same thing. So the job market at this point is going through this metamorphosis that's going to be really ugly in the end. Most of the predictions that even people in the AI industry have said, where we're going to lose 80% of the jobs or 90% of the jobs. That's probably extreme. But in the short term, there's a major reconstruction of the labor force, and it's going to probably end up maybe 30 to 40% of all jobs will be obsoleted at some point, and let's say in 3 years or so. That's a lot. That's really a lot. So the labor market's undergoing a huge reset, and jobs at this point they're not what they used to be. People are spreading themselves across multiple jobs, doing contract work for several companies at the same time. This is not the kind of a job you used to have, when you're secure in your job and you say, well, I'm going to retire in this job, and That's not that. That's over. Like he said, that was Brett Weinstein, by the way.
Brett Weinstein. Thank you.
So I think there's a couple competing narratives going on with job market right now, because I've heard analysts that are saying things like, yes, AI layoffs are the excuse for right sizing and over hiring and salary premium process that was instituted just as COVID was wrecking the world. And that what we're seeing is actually right sizing of the talent pool. I also hear, which is, by the way, this is very interesting, because here's the other side of this. They're hiring people that they formerly terminated because of these AI reasons, because the AI, systems are not what they appear to be. They're not the magic bullet. They don't autonomously compute things perfectly. And what's happening inside of software engineering teams is there's a shift of what exactly does an engineer do anymore. This is a very, very significant transform. And it's coming down. It's not just about prompt engineering. It's about the discipline of being able to spot when something is heading in the wrong direction and arresting the AI before it goes too far and begins affecting production code base. So what's happening is that the engineering man-hour effort that's going on isn't necessarily in the raw programming side of it, all the lines of code, which was always the classic way of looking at it, into the QA procedures, the way that you promote code into it's called the CI/CD pipeline, continuous integration, continuous delivery. Anybody else notice how often you're getting update requests on your software apps? It's like every day you're getting there's a new update, please click to install it. And so the pace of these changes requires increasing focus, because AI produces slop. So there's a lot of issues with AI-based programming, and it requires a pretty serious emphasis on making sure that companies are doing it in a compensatory way. So they're still getting the benefits of the velocity, but where the emphasis is changing. And unfortunately, it's the super senior people that have the experience, the domain knowledge, the tribal knowledge within a corporation, where AI has not been trained to do that yet, has not been able to successfully take over all that history. If you've got an engineer that's been in a company for 20 or 30 years, you're not replacing that engineer with ChatGPT, that's for sure. So it's really confusing to know what's actually happening, or the root cause for what is it, what's the change agent here. So I see various aspects of it, but I don't know, what do you guys think? Britt, have you heard anything about this stuff?
Well, I think what we're going to see is similar to what we were talking about earlier with the internet. Everybody could see the transformative ability of the internet, but a lot of businesses needed time to understand how their unique capabilities and offerings fit into and integrated with that internet revolution. And so it's going to take time. As you just said, there's a lot of factors that you just don't get AI off a shelf and it replaces a human being. But it's going to start with making those employees who are there more productive and expand outward until certain roles disappear. And I think the problem here isn't necessarily that jobs will go away. There will be new jobs that are created. We've seen this cycle over and over and over throughout history. The problem is the pace of change, because we're climbing this exponential curve right now. And so imagine the 200 years of industrial revolution change packed into a 5 or 10 year period. and how jolting that's going to be to so many people who won't have the ability to adapt quickly. And I think especially when we look at, we've talked in the past, and Patrick has talked extensively about our monetary system as a debt-based monetary system. And I liken it to a Ponzi scheme, because in order to continue moving forward, you need ever greater amounts of debt to be taken on. Once that debt starts to implode, the whole system falls apart. And so imagine if we see 30-40% of these jobs go away very quickly. Think of all the people who lose income, that have mortgages, who have car loans, who have student loan debt, credit cards, home equity lines credit, all these debts that they can't pay off. Those get defaulted on. That will shrink the currency supply and become deflationary in and of itself. And AI itself is a deflationary event, this higher productivity of technology. And so I think this is going to lead to really a breaking of our current economic system, and it sets conditions, it puts conditions in place that are ripe for the rise of a demagogue who, if you've got mass numbers of people who are unemployed, and here's the, I think, a key overlooked aspect of that is many people roll up their identity, not in Jesus Christ, but in their job. So I'm not saying Christians don't do that, but many people out in the world wrap their identity into their job. So what happens when their job goes away and they have a sense of no more purpose? Again, this is exactly what we saw in the Great Depression with the rise of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. You have a demagogue that can step into that vacuum and offer people, here, I can give you purpose and I can give you work to do, and you can get fed and you can receive all of these things, universal basic income, whatever it may be. And so I think this is really going to be jarring for society on a global basis, and really put conditions in place that lead to the rise of the Antichrist.
Can I jump in at this point? Possibly. Sure. I need to pivot with you. Just what you said here. My new book, by the way, just came out. This is The New Economics of Technocracy. You Will Own Nothing. I wrote this book on the heels of this book, The Final Betrayal, that I penned with Courtney Turner last year. We released this in November 4. Since then, and this little book was written in real time. It was amazing how we did it. This book covers what happened since November of last year. The stuff that just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I can't, no way I can explain it all, but I want to talk about the prophetical angle of this. There's a concentration of wealth, trade, and technocratic influence moving to the Mideast, big time. AI firms are moving there to build data centers on the sand, free real estate, free energy. They have lots of energy over there. And we have this new trade route that's being erected from India to Europe. It's going to be the biggest thing, and probably since, I don't know when, but maybe ancient trade routes. So there's lots of money being accumulated in the Middle East. And when you consider that Islamic finance is all based on assets, they have no debt in their system. They're debt-free in that sense. But their system, their economic system, is based on assets, not debt. This is contrary to us, for sure. But now that debt is, in our country, especially in the West, is coming under attack, everybody has a picture of it crashing and burning at some point. The asset-based system that's being erected right now by people like, well, the Trump family, Eric Kushner, even Barron Trump. I mean, all these people are getting into this cryptocurrency area to tokenize everything in sight, not just for payment tokens, but also for asset tokens. This is why the Islamic world has been keen onto financial technologies for all these years. I scratched my head over this. What on earth do they care about, blockchain and tokens and all that kind of stuff, that the Islamic world? Well, now it's very clear it suits their purposes to program the tokens to support their economic system. This is the same thing that's happening in America now with the tokenization of everything. Larry Fink said, "Oh, we're going to tokenize everything." The New York Stock Exchange just recently, like last week, said they're going to tokenize all of the stocks on the New York Stock Exchange. What? That's crazy stuff. But this tokenization stuff is taking over the world, apparently. So having said that, we have all of a sudden this combined economic system being merged into the Mideast system. They have the Muslims have, I think, 1.8 billion people under their net. A lot of people. So all of a sudden, there's been this shift to the Mideast for AI development, for fintech technologies, for global trade that will cut through. But by the way, they need the Strait of Hormuz to make this all work. That's a small detail, right? Trump's taking care of that right now. But if they can get the Strait of Hormuz under control, this trade route will combine sea route, land route, but it's more than just that. It's a corridor of multiple things, like fiber optic cables, like pipelines for oil and natural gas, things like hydrogen as well. India has lots of hydrogen. That's something they'd like to export. So this new trade route is focused in the Mideast. That's my point. Everybody but Americans see that. I think on the global elite, they understand exactly what's going on there. But from a biblical prophecy point of view, if you can zoom in on that map a little bit there, possibly, you'll see where historic Babylon is in relation to the Strait of Hormuz. You just go into the strait, right up to the sea there at the top of that. There's a major port being developed there. It's called the Al-Fa port. It's a deep water port, massive capabilities. All the ships will go through the Strait of Hormuz to get there. That's not on the IMEC corridor, however, but from a Bible prophecy point of view, all of a sudden you have a trade route that it will be capable of untold riches. I did an AI analysis just today. What is the possibility of what kind of volume of trade could we see in a year, for instance, or not 1 year, but 5 years? Industry experts are saying, well, likely it's going to exceed $1 trillion per year. That's a lot of trade, any way you look at it. And all that wealth just close to the historic city of Babylon. I've been watching this I'm not saying that's it necessarily, but I've been watching historic Babylon for a long time. And all of a sudden, we see this focus on wealth building, and it's coming to the Mideast, or the Gulf states. And what do you guys think? I mean, this is a big deal. I think it's going to be a really big deal in 2 or 3 years. And we see the operators are already there. especially with Gaza, and Trump wants to take over Gaza with a board of peace, and he wants to build a financial system there for all the people in Gaza based on the Trump family's World Liberty Financial System, that or company that has brought the USD1 token to the table. And so all of a sudden, the chips or the building blocks are moving in the Middle East like crazy at this point. I can't understand all of the ramifications, but I sense in my spirit there's a big thing going over there. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Who wants to pop in? I will. Patrick, I love reading the things you write and listening to you. I think we spoke a few weeks ago about similar things. We didn't get into the detail you did just now about Alpha Port, but we did talk about how as things began in Israel and the Mideast, they will end in Israel and the Mideast when you look at Bible prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
The epicenter is the Temple Mount itself, and then from there you expand through Jerusalem and Israel. But as you look at all of the different nations that are mentioned in the Bible regarding the days that are coming, that are part of this dynamic of the last days, it is everything we are watching right now. When we think of Ezekiel 38, you think of the nations that end up coming to the Lord. You realize, wait a minute, you've got Egypt involved, you have ancient Assyria, which is Iraq, you have Babylon involved, you have Jordan coming to know the Lord, the Lord God of Israel in the last days. It all centers there. We have a Western world where you have this rise of the beast himself, but nevertheless, where you have the epicenter, it's Israel and all of those surrounding nations. And I don't think it's an accident when you look at all of this wealth that's being poured in there. And when I look at it biblically, my perspective is it leans toward everything that you are saying. When I think of what Babylon is in the last days, I don't think it's New York City. I don't think it's Los Angeles or any of these other things that are out there. I think it's very clear that God meant what he said. How it all unfolds, I don't know. Like you said, IMEC doesn't necessarily run right through there, but I don't know how it's all going to unfold. But as each day moves on, we seem to be getting more clarity, but we also seem to be getting more overwhelmed with all of the information that is coming our way. And in a sense, with me, it's very exciting to watch things unfold. But again, you look at the tokenization of everything, the wealth that the Trump family is building. I think it was Bill Koenig who said just the other day, Trump now has 2 Trump towers he's building. I think he said in Turkey, and I never heard about that till Bill said that. So you watch this and you go, we live in interesting days, and everything's happening so fast, it's hard to keep up.
So I'll weigh in that I have maybe a little bit different view. I'm not sure of this, and I'm not speaking of any of you guys, but I hear people talk about Alpha and Babylon a lot, and they'll say, well, it can't be New York City because that's a city, or America, that's not a city. And so then we talk about Babylon, and we need to be very honest about this. There's not really anything built in Babylon yet. And I don't think that some apartment buildings in a city close to there, or big things in Baghdad, 56 miles away, or Al Port, 350 miles away, necessarily fits the bill, unless it's going to be a region. Okay. But then, the people who say it's a region are going to be making the argument. My concern is this. There's sort of this conflict that I see in our prophecy, not conflict with each other, but with timelines and logistics of building this thing. Now, first of all, I think wherever this Babylon is, and by the way, it's called a mystery. Now, we can argue about what that means and does that change the location. And there's a lot of good, smart people that think have some different views on location. But it does irritate me a bit when I hear some people talk about this, and they never use the term mystery. It's like it's disappeared from their Bible, and I don't like that. And we need to call them out when they do that. So I'm calling them out without naming them. But and so so right now in this war, Strait of Hormuz is shut down. Strait of Hormuz is essential being open for Al-Fa port. We can all agree 100% on that. And the question is it going to be open? So the countries in the Gulf are making alternative arrangements, like Saudi Arabia has an older pipeline that they've reopened, and they're shipping a lot of their oil. In fact, they're making more money on the oil that they're getting through this pipeline to the Red Sea than they did when they were shipping things through the Strait of Hormuz. And they're not shipping as much, but they're getting more dollars for it. But the problem I have is that pipeline was shut down for a while because of a drone attack. And so I don't know how these trade corridors work with the drone technology. Now, people will bring up Iron Beam, but Iron Beam has a very limited range. Maybe 5 kilometers it can operate. So do you put a bunch of iron beams along the 800 or 1,000 mile long pipeline to shoot down the drones or the missiles? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm just saying I see a bunch of logistical problems. We trial lawyers were often considered to be the pathologists of the legal profession because we always see the problems and not necessarily the solutions. So I'm just saying this may very well be it, okay? But I also see, regardless of the trade corridor, there are just arrangements this week, agreement between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Jordan, and Syria to revive the railway rebuild it. And they've got commitment of billions of dollars to do that. I think the United Arab Emirates is in on this too. But again, if you can get a pipeline, you can get a railroad and the railroad train with a drone or a missile or whatever. So I don't know how this works out. I don't know if Iran is dialed back from its hostility to everybody. And then Iraq itself is in a very state of considerable political turmoil. It's by no means solved. So I don't know how it all works out. And then you throw the Kurds in and everything. But I think Turkey is working. I mean, Turkey was, I think, a big factor behind the Al-Fa port. But they're on. Erdogan's going to do anything to his advantage. And then there's the, Patrick, what's the other thing called? The Trump, what's the name? It's the Trip corridor from the Caspian Sea through Azerbaijan along the Armenian border to Turkey to the pipeline system in Turkey. And I think that's Trump Regional International Peace and Prosperity Corridor or something like it. It's called TRIP. So I don't know. My own view is that there are a lot of logistical issues in addition to getting the thing solved in Iran. Okay.
I do want to say one thing, John,
Go ahead.
Just so for clarity for everybody, because you have mentioned you don't hear a lot of people mention Mystery Babylon. And I think, you and I have had this conversation elsewhere before, but I think the reason why you don't hear that a lot is because some people use Mystery Babylon as if it's the title, which it's not. In the Greek, it is actually an adjective. And that's probably the reason why a lot of teachers don't use it when they talk about it, because people get confused and other people take it to be this title. And then They can't separate. They don't understand. Chapter 17 is describing this religious dynamic, and chapter 18 is describing the physical city. So just to answer that question, I think
Right.
that's why a lot of guys just avoid it, because too many people get confused, and then you watch YouTube and they build something that's just crazy with some theory, and they get 8 zillion views. So that's probably why on that. And I also totally agree. I don't see exactly how it's going to work out, but we do know it's going to work out. But from day to day, it's like, what the heck is going to, what happened today is probably going to be different from what we see tomorrow.
Yeah,
but it is interesting. But it is interesting for the foundation that's being laid there, Todd, because as you said, the harlot in Revelation is the false religion. So we have false religion tied in. We have the physical aspect of Babylon, where the headquarters will be for the Antichrist, and then you have the marketplace, the spirit of it. So it's both a spiritual side and a physical side. But what we're seeing for the foundation, as Patrick mentioned, with the stable coins, and he mentioned the USD1. I mean, Trump has already put that together. You can go on the website and see all the members that he has. His family is basically the members of that. But they've already cut a deal with Pakistan, so they're bringing Pakistan into that. That when they start cutting deals with stable coins and saying this is how we want to have our business to be, to me that lays the foundation. And then you have the board of peace, what Patrick also mentioned there, that Trump may not be president a couple of years from now, but he's still going to be the chairman of the board of peace. Yeah. And when you have world leaders coming in paying $1 billion each to be part of the board of peace, that's not going to go away. Now, who knows what Gaza is going to happen, what the plans for Gaza are, if that comes to fruition or not. But you have that foundation of world leaders coming together, putting in their money, large sums of money to be involved with that, and Trump being the chairman of the board. And he's very much into AI, and he's very much into the digital stable coins and so on and so forth. So that foundation is laid. That's not going to go away. We don't know how it's going to work out logistically. We don't know how it's going to work out systematically, but we do see the foundation. I don't think that's going to be a weak foundation that's going to crumble very quickly. That's it.
Okay. So I mean, I agree. I agree with you. Look, I think most of the people who might disagree over Babylon or someplace else, Middle East centered, I think, is where a lot of people agree. And I think my view is that if it's going to be like the original Babel, it's not going to be finished before it's destroyed. So it's going to be in process. And then the question is, how quickly can it become this great city that rules over the kings of the earth? And what does the Bible mean when it says great city? Is it because there's, at least if we're looking at Babylon, there's not much there yet.
It's when it talks about the city it's going to become in chapter 18 of Revelation, what Patrick is describing is what it is. It seems it's this center of world commerce. Yes. And some of the products that are mentioned in chapter 18 include things that the upper class kind of people had, the finest of gold, the finest of this, the finest of oils. And then it even says the bodies and souls of men, which leads you to believe it's talking even about trafficking people through what's coming. But it is a massive, what it appears to be, to me, John, is, and you guys might have a different point of view, but I believe it's primarily this major hub financially. And exactly how that works out, I don't know. But I find it interesting with that, based on the things Patrick has brought up about the whole purpose or what their plan is.
I think there's a principle here where I think we've seen a number of areas that were kind of mysterious, using a strong word there, in just the last few years that are getting a lot clearer. And I think this mystery Babylon thing and how this is going to work is going to be increasingly visible over a period of time. And we'll look back, if we're still here, Lord tarries, then we'll go back and say, oh, yeah, we saw this coming. And now it makes sense almost. But I for example, I see the peace and safety concept for Israel beginning to materialize visibly. I could see now that could be a reality. And 3 years ago, you wouldn't have said something like that. It just wasn't clear how it was going to happen. So a lot of things are changing, and it's important to, I'm thinking that who was it? Was it Dr. Mark Hitchcock that basically says that Babylon will physically be reconstructed on the ruins? But I thought there was a scripture that said that it's inhabited by hyenas and other wild animals and will forever be that way. Is that,
Well,
do you guys remember that?
Yeah,
but
there are different views on that, Scott. I mean, Joel Kramer did a video saying, hey, that prophecy is fulfilled because there's not, he went to Babylon and said, look, there's nothing here and it's a wasteland. And others say it will be rebuilt. So is it rebuilt? I don't know if it's rebuilt on the exact site, but I mean, if what I'm told by the proponents of it, the strong proponents of it, meaning guys who've written books about it, Babylon means Babylon and nothing else. So then it has to be rebuilt there. I mean, and right now there's very little there. I get these emails, they're building a Holiday Inn Express there or near there. And I'm like, okay, when it's something significant, but get back to me. But everybody gets excited. It's sort of like whenever, Nasrallah sneezed or somebody sneezed, everybody thought, oh, this is it. And I don't know that that's the case, but I think you got to watch it. I've been talking about Al Port for 8 years, but it's still, Iraq is a very problematic place. But I don't mean to shut off the discussion and valid points of my colleagues here. So I don't know. I guess my question is, how long do you think it takes to do? We sort of do this like, well, we don't think, this will happen. But then we talk about a bazillion things that have happened in the last few years. Even in the time since we started doing this, I don't remember how long when we did the first one of these. But a lot of development and changes.
In my history from 1970 or so, how many presidents have tried to remake Israel a land of peace? Every single one has tried and failed. Jimmy Carter, Reagan, Clinton, Bush, all of them tried to reform somehow Israel. They all failed. Politically, they failed. All of a sudden, along comes Jared Kushner, that's Trump's son-in-law, who architected in the first Trump administration as special envoy to the Mideast. He's the guy that tried another tact, an economic tact, to create the Abraham Accords based on economic cooperation, not political cooperation. All of a sudden, the landscape has changed in the Middle East. All of a sudden, you have Saudi Arabia says, well, we want to be friends with Israel now. The UAE, they want to be friends with Israel. This was unheard of before, politically speaking. But now, economically speaking, we see, a different picture at this point. So the false peace that certainly will come at some point when all of its neighbors around Israel are going to say, we love you and we're going to be with you and we're going to help you and whatever, you're going to be our trade partner and whatever it might be, then it's all going to fall apart at some point. But nevertheless, not Howard, but Jared Kushner has been the guy that brought us this whole business of the Abraham Accords. And now, on top of that, people who are architecting the trade corridor, IMEC, same people. Kushner is at the forefront of this whole thing, and people are saying, well, IMEC corridor would not have been possible if it were not for the Abraham Accords in the first place. Okay, so you have one strong family who has changed the nature of the Mideast probably forever, at least not politically. It's not politically divided at this point, but economically it's going to be together. I can't tell what's going to happen. I don't have a crystal ball. I'll tell you what, I can say this at the least. Something big is going on in the Middle East. We haven't seen this before. And when you have the concentration of wealth moving to the Middle East, and forget Babylon at that point, just the fact that this amount of wealth, economic wealth and trade, all of a sudden is showing up in the Middle East, the Gulf states in particular, that's huge in my opinion. It means something. The whole nature of global trade is changing.
Yeah, this is my AI generated Jared Kushner chess piece that I put together for my little chessboard in PowerPoints. But Patrick, I do agree with you. It's very significant what's going on. And if you look at the news just from the last week, you know, some of the missing pieces of this have been, well, Saudi Arabia is not formally in yet. I personally think when the king dies, that's going to change. Literally almost overnight or after a 30-day mourning period. You'll see Saudi Arabia's position modified significantly. And King Salman, I think, is 90 now, so I don't think he's going to last forever. But of course, I thought that 5 years ago. But and now, you know, we see Israeli ministers and people in Lebanon saying, we're going to get this solved with Hezbollah, and Lebanon's going to come into the Abraham Accords. And I think that's a pretty significant piece. So, anyway. So if we beat this horse enough tonight. So Scott, I want to turn to you because I think there's two more things that I want to talk about before we quit tonight. And one is the Palantir manifesto, which I think is kind of significant and important. But maybe before we get there, we talk about this thing with Anthropic and is it called Mythos? Is that Mythos. the software that, or I'm sorry, what, I don't know. Tell us what Mythos is. Is it
It's a model.
A model?
Yeah.
And what the implications of that were.
Okay. So, first of all, things are moving at breakneck speed. I was just reading today that SpaceX and XAI have just inked a deal to buy Cursor. And Cursor is a IDE that allows programmers to program, basically. It's an environment. And I use Cursor 6 days a week, okay? So I've been a customer of theirs for a long time. And I think they penned a $60 billion deal there's an option for it to be closed by the end of the year. But as a fallback, they guarantee $10 billion payment. So Cursor won big today. And OpenAI has been releasing things right now, and they've been almost in a predatory, capitalistic posture right now because Anthropic, we'll get there in just a second, has been kind of stumbling over a number of things that they've been trying to do. And OpenAI is actually benefiting quite a bit by having a more, I would say, consistent and predictable, friendly atmosphere about how they're conducting business, especially for developers. And by the way, their user base is something like 800 million people. Just let that number sink in right now. But getting to Anthropic, they released their next model. Actually, they just came out with Opus 4.7, by the way. So that's not exactly correct. Mythos came out public knowledge about Mythos came out when they announced a program called Glasswing. This is the first AI model that it actually has been announced, but what Anthropic did is they put almost like a hedge or a moat around who actually gets access to it. And the reason for that is it was trained on security, and it was trained, continued to be fine-tuned on programming. And the combination of security research and vulnerability assessment and all of this has scared a significant amount of people. And what Anthropic did, which I think is the correct move, is they started to point Mythos to code bases out there, and they're discovering bugs all over the place, vulnerabilities that no one knew about. And Mythos has the raw competency, I don't call it intelligent, but it has the competency and the training background and the new fine tuning so that it can discover it. Well, if you could discover a vulnerability, what do you do with it? Well, Project Glasswing is designed to bring into an inner circle of the largest tech companies in the world. I'm talking about every operating system. So that would be Windows, Mac OS, Linux. It has major infrastructure players like Cisco and the guys that run switches and chips and technical stack stuff. There's about, I think there's like 15 or 18. Everyone would know these companies. And they've given Mythos to these companies to say, you guys need to go use this to go fix your software. Because if they put access to Mythos out into the public, like a general availability release, and bad actors got into there and began to ask it to find an exploit in this library. Well, Mythos has the ability to do that. And then you've got all the hackers out there and the bad actors and people doing breaches and other things. So what they want for the core tech companies to fix. And no one's going to know these numbers exactly, but there are thousands of vulnerabilities that Mythos is assisting with these tech companies to discover them, analyze them, and then for the teams to remediate it and get into production to fix it before general availability of Mythos gets out. It's rumored that Opus 4.7, which just dropped in the last week, is a cut down version of Mythos. Has been kind of lobotomized from the highest levels of competency that Mythos has been programmed with. Especially, they detuned its security training that it did. And so the Mythos, I think we're going to see, I wrote on this on my Substack a week ago. I'm very concerned about this news. I think it's freaking a lot of people out by saying it's the end of security as we know it. I don't know that I would go that far, but it is interesting to me that I'm also hearing that the government, the Pentagon and other agencies have noticed that they've got to have Mythos, but at the same time that Trump has banned basically the Pentagon and other government agencies from using Anthropic products. There's a sunset window for this, but Mythos is absolutely critical for them to glean as much security and vulnerability research as they can so that they could fix their things, and for three-letter agencies to exploit things in the wild. So you know how those agencies do that stuff. So it's groundbreaking. There's never been a model that has been so competent that it's never actually made it to market per se. This is not available. It's privately gated to help the rest of the tech industry get their hands on the fixes that are going to be needed in order to protect consumers and governments and institutions and everybody. So it's a very, very big development. The average person, you know, I can't use Mythos. You know, I use Opus 4.7 among the ChatGPT stuff too. I use 5.3 Codex and 5.4. And by the way, this deal with Cursor, XAI, and SpaceX, one of the reasons why I think they made this $60 billion offer is because Cursor has been training on all the developers around the world how their coding experience has been going. So they have a very unique, insight into how developers are actually using it to code, and it's learning. They have their own private model called called Composer. They just launched 2.0, and it's fast and it's good. Come to find out, it is likely to have been based on a Chinese model called GLM or Kimi K2 2.5, I think it is. That's an Alibaba model, if I recall correctly. So there's all kinds of stuff. But if Grok 4.3, Grok has not been really great to work with. It hallucinates a lot, and Elon has been whispering that they just need to start it over again. And I could see Cursor having its new Composer model becoming a foundation for what XAI and these other companies could potentially use. So there is a lot of moving pieces, and this is all news, by the way, in the last 7 days, roughly.
You're muted, John.
I should just say a word of encouragement here and advice. When we hear about something like this that has such a big security and vulnerability thing, we have to be smart. So the commercial break right now would to make sure that you have antivirus active on your whatever computer you're using, your phone. Please make sure that you are taking basic precautions. These are things that have been done for years. This is not rocket scientists, but if you're not protecting yourself by basic security systems, I use Norton, for example. Others use other systems. I try to base it on a U.S. company, by the way. There are very good, security companies that are based in Russia and other places. I wouldn't trust them, so I go with a publicly traded U.S. company. That's why I use Norton. And I think that making sure that we're not clicking links inside of a text message or an email. I just have to tell you guys, I don't do that. I see a mail coming in or a text, and then I see who it's purported to be from. I don't even care to look at the URL to make sure that it's formed correctly or if it's spelled differently. I don't even do that. What I do is I go to my normal device that I normally do, normally a computer, and I log in from my computer. I don't click links. Okay, that's how a lot of this stuff trips people up. So just a word of advice, begin to discipline yourself on impersonation attempts. They're getting tremendously sophisticated. I see, and I get targeted. So I see like calendar invites that automatically appear inside of Office 365. I didn't accept it, right? I didn't say I would accept and attend that meeting. It just appears. And there's all kinds of links and things in that email invite. And it always is something urgent. I have to do this. There's a billing problem. You're past due. There's tempting. There's an NDA contract you need to sign. So they're luring people in to think about, oh, something's wrong. I need to go do this. So just be wise about how you think about, this season coming up, and begin to instill this discipline into how you approach electronic communications today. Okay, so that we're ready for things to begin to go a little sideways a little bit later. Okay, just a word of advice.
So, Scott, you do think that Mythos was a really severe threat?
Yes. Yeah, there's absolutely no reason why Anthropic would create Project Glasswing and then begin to work with the major tech infrastructure people just on a whim. I mean, can you imagine the amount of resources? I mean, Microsoft, for example, is a key player. They're finding bugs. BSD is an open source Linux utility. It's been out there for 16 years, I think it is. And they found a bug in it that is basically is a CVE. It's an exploitable thing. And if anyone got the figured out how to exploit it, that BSD software system is run in all the routers, Wi-Fi, everything. I mean, it's just wide open. And so they had to work with these companies because of the potential implications of not working with them to get these things fixed. So Mythos is a big deal. And I think that these companies are making changes. I believe that if I were Microsoft, speaking for myself, I don't know, my thinking is they'll task 1,000, 2,000 developers. They'll put a team of people that are remediating these bugs. They're pulling from all the senior engineers in the company in order to address these long-standing issues. And it's like a code red fire drill right now inside of these companies, but you would never really know it. But the implications of Mythos is pretty significant.
Is there a chance that Mythos could break the barriers and move itself out into
it already
the
has.
public?
Yeah, they've already seen it. So one of the developers, this is not new, by the way. AI does break out occasionally. So what they're very, very concerned about is sandboxing or containerizing the model. And they were running safety and alignment exercises, which are not, fully, they don't have the right level of commitment to safety and harness training because they're working so fast. It's estimated that they needed 20% of all the GPU compute spend to be on the safety and alignment team. But in OpenAI's case, they're only giving it 1% to 2%. So they're vastly under-resourced for the compute they need in order to stay up to speed with alignment and safety. And of course, security is a major alignment safety issue. Not to mention the fact that we see executives continuing to leave. They're just leaving, these head of alignment and safety people, because I think they see it on the inside. They don't want their name and their career to be associated with these things at some point in the future. We don't know how far in the future it goes. But yeah, this is a big deal. And I think we just need to begin reacting as the body of Christ. All right, we could have been a little lazy over the years, but I think the time for us to be smarter about how we're approaching this season is definitely something. By the way, because generative AI is also improving with voice quality and video quality. OpenAI just announced Image 2 processing, and they've retired Sora, which shocked a lot of people because they just need to get the the compute reallocated. But be careful if you hear a loved one calling you, asking for money. Okay, this is a bad problem right now, and it's going to get a lot worse. Always have some kind of a code word that you have established with the people that are in your inner circle, so that if there's a challenge response phrase that an AI somewhere or some hacker somewhere would never know. So just be intelligent, learn these skills and try to protect yourself the best that you can.
Scott, I'm not the expert that you are in that field, but the name is pretty interesting to me because mythos in Greek philosophy means what people see in reality and what people fear and what people trust. And that sounds like what you just described.
Yeah, exactly. There's all this hidden stuff in there, There's layer upon layer of, I would say, elite nonsense involved in this stuff. And who knows what's actually, symbolically inside the model and what it's capable of doing.
Okay, so let me, on that upbeat note, maybe we should talk a little bit about the Palantir manifesto. So Palantir seems to be a very big player in this space. Patrick, maybe you could just sort of summarize for people a little bit about the history of Palantir and some of the people behind it. And then we'll talk a little bit about their manifesto. Then we'll wrap up.
You're muted, Patrick.
I think you're muted. There we go.
There we go. I was eating some crackers. I had to turn my microphone off. You wouldn't want to hear that for sure. Palantir got a start when Alex Karp and Peter Thiel got together somewhere around 2003, I think, and they took over a project wrapped around a private company, Palantir. They took over a project that the CIA was in charge of at some point, and they had as their first client the CIA, that basically set the tone for Palantir's development of all of the systems. For the first 6 years or so, the CIA was their primary client. That tells you something about the history. There's nothing really more to say. It was based on spooks in the first place, and that's basically set the stage for everything that happened since. Now Palantir is the largest and runaway success commercially of this type of software. They don't, by the way, manufacture data. They don't collect data. They use other companies to collect the data. They simply provide the overview software to make sense of all that data. This is what's happened, for instance, with the targeting systems in the Ukraine. They're collecting existing data, making sense of it, then figure out where a bad guy is and go get him. So when you consider the people that are behind Palantir, especially Alex Karp, this guy is just unplugged. He's the guy that kind of got this manifesto together recently. We've all maybe seen it. I examined it very carefully when it came out. This guy's really crazy, but he's not a programmer. This is interesting because, like Sam Altman, he's not a programmer either. He has a degree in philosophy, for one thing. Was undergrad. Then he went to law school at Stanford, got a degree on law. He never practiced law. Then he went to Germany and studied
Philosophy.
Philosophy in Germany, not just any philosophy, but Goethe University is the home of the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory. So he comes to Peter Thiel with all this embedded stuff in his brain, you name it, crazy, all progressive stuff, let's put it that way. Starting with Karl Marx for sure, even Sigmund Freud, that's big in the Frankfurt School. So when he came out with this manifesto, you have to understand that he's twisted in his mind, I think, with all of his philosophical ideals or thoughts. You see it all over this. I see it all over this document. So when he talks about wanting to create a hardcore mechanism of rule, well, that would be AI for sure. When he talks about wanting to defer to like an autocrat or a monarch, he's also in line with this philosophy that Curtis Yarvin did under Peter Thiel's tutelage, called the Dark Enlightenment. So you see these ideas being expressed, and if you look very carefully on them, you'll come to the same conclusion that people around the world are saying at this point: this guy is a maniac in waiting. If he gets in control over major systems in the world, we should really look out for this guy. That's my opinion.
Okay, so maybe we could just talk briefly. Let me get this about. I mean, the manifesto was like, it's similar to what Alex Karp said in the past. We're going to build the biggest killing systems we can, or so. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but I don't think that it's inaccurate that he said that at conferences in the past. And these guys have worked with both sides of the political spectrum, right, Patrick?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
And so he couches everything in terms of American patriotism, but I mean, what should we make of it? I mean, first of all, what should we make of it? And secondly, what can we do about it?
It's a private company. Unfortunately, you can't do anything to stop them. And when Peter Thiel started the company in the first place, by the way, he used a technique. Facebook has used the same technique. They can never be ousted from management of the company. It doesn't matter, stock ownership aside. They can own just 5% of the company, but they can't be ousted, and they're going to be effectively in operational control over the major decisions of the company, the direction of the company.
It's similar to how Trump's doing the Board of Peace.
Well, sort of. This is a former technique, and it's what it does is sets up a class of stock that nobody has access to other than the founders of the company. It's not exactly preferred stock, but the idea is the voting of on the direction of the company is vested in those people. There's three of them, actually. There's another co-founder of the company. This is very successful. Mark Zuckerberg has done the same thing. That's why he's never been ousted from the company. He can't be ousted. So this is that's a dirty trick. Some people will say that they do this, but it was legal. Yeah. So it's shrewd for sure.
So anybody have any thoughts on this with Palantir and his manifesto? And
yeah, can you pull up point number 12? Because I hadn't seen this until you sent it out, and this one really stood out to me.
Here.
It was on the atomic age ending, And I think this is something we don't really hear a lot discussed really anywhere, but we've seen world leader after world leader talking about the whoever wins the AI race will rule the world. All that, and Vladimir Putin said that several years ago. Now we've got members of the Trump administration saying the same thing. And it says in this, it says the atomic age is ending. It's not talking about nuclear power. We're actually seeing that ramp up. So what they're talking about is nuclear weapons. It says one age of deterrence, the atomic age, is ending. And a new era of deterrence built on AI is set to begin. And so we don't hear a lot talked about this, but for 80 years now, what's prevented major powers, nuclear powers, from going to war with each other is the doctrine of mutual assured destruction. Mm-hmm. And they're basically saying that's going to go out the window, that nuclear weapons, that mutual assured destruction will become obsolete as a result of these advanced technologies. And I agree that that is the case. I take exception with the second part of that statement when he says a new era of deterrence built on AI is set to begin, because I guess it's on this idea that there will be a new mutual assured destruction based on these advanced technologies with AI at the forefront. But as AI doesn't deter anything, it actually escalates, because you're going to have exponentially advancing technologies. If you don't know where your adversary, what their capabilities are today, much less a year from now. Think about what Patrick was saying earlier about thousands of times more powerful by the end of the Trump administration. This is exponential change. It creates a volatility. It creates an uneasiness, a distrust among major powers. So you can't enter this post-nuclear age with multiple powers. You must, because you're going to end up with a catastrophic global war that threatens us all. So you're going to have the solution to that being global government, whether it's through conquest or through voluntary means. That's the only way to avoid this type of catastrophic war. And so that really stood out to me when I saw that, because we hear all of these world leaders talking about the end of nuclear weapons as a deterrent. But we don't hear it really discussed elsewhere. And that tells us we're heading into a new era.
So, Britt, I mean, are you saying that it's not, because there's all this talk, with some of the different theories, a unipolar world versus a multipolar world. You're saying this is pushing it towards a really tight unipolar world. Is that what you're saying? Am I using the right terms?
When to me, once you're able to overturn mutual assured destruction, and I believe that will happen with these advanced technologies, particularly molecular manufacturing. That's something I talked about for years. You cannot have two powers coexisting or multiple powers coexisting. It's very unstable. You don't have the stability of mutual assured destruction. You have two powers engaged in an exponential arms race, very volatile. It erupts into war, and everybody dies. So whoever is the first mover in that area will see that danger and use their first mover advantage to conquer the globe. So, and that is right out of the Bible. That's what we read about. We read in Revelation 6 that there's war and slaughter everywhere, all over the world. And at the end of that, we have the Antichrist in Revelation 13 ruling over every people, tribe, nation, and language. And so but we don't really hear any discussion about a post-mad era. Hardly anywhere, but we see world leaders alluding to it constantly over the last 10 years. And yet there's still this expectation, Russia will never go to war with the United States because of mutual assured destruction. Well, for right now, while that's still in place, but once that's no longer in place, that will no longer be a deterrent.
So are you suggesting that then that AI has the ability or the intent to take over the world for the sake of building peace into the world?
Yeah, peace meaning the absence of an adversary who is able to make war against the beast, not with AI. Hey, we're going to develop this with these wonderful intent to
Not
bring
benevolent.
about world peace. It's not benevolent, but it's a feature of the system because, again, you look at it from the standpoint of a world leader making a policy decision. I go, okay, I have this first mover advantage. I can sit on it, allow someone else to develop the same capability, but there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to peacefully coexist with those two capabilities because I don't know what the capabilities of my adversary are in an era where you have these technologies exponentially changing. You know, I mean, we haven't seen exponential change in nuclear technology over the last 80 years. But we're seeing that with AI, we're seeing that with quantum computing, we're seeing that with the ability to direct swarms, we're seeing that, I believe, headed toward this manufacturing capability that's going to transform everything on the battlefield. And so you can't afford to take that chance if you had that first mover advantage. If you're looking at it and saying, if I allow another power to develop, then we all die. Or I can conquer the world and we'll figure it out afterward, where we go from there. And I think that almost every world leader would choose option number one, whether their intentions are good or evil or whatever people believe they are. The capability will be there, and I think that just the idea of that capability is something that not a lot of people are talking about.
Any other thoughts? And then we'll move to wrapping up, I guess, since we've been going quite a while tonight. This it's like we never scratched the surface on this stuff.
No, and unfortunately, we saw some questions that we didn't address either. We probably need to be a little more aware of that. I know people would love to be able to do a little bit of question answer stuff, but it seems to be a challenge for us. So.
Well, maybe next time we can just focus on that.
Thank
Try
you, John.
to do another one in May. We always say that, but if we could just get the guys involved in this to just kind of take a month off, and then
yeah,
I'm sort of, I have to tell you that it's I mean, I'm watching this stuff a long time, as all of you have, and it's daunting. I would just say, I'll be honest. I
don't need to be full screen anymore, John.
Oh,
fix that.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody wants to stare at me.
Did you want to scratch your nose or something? Well, why don't we just kind of go around? We'll start with maybe Scott, and then we'll just kind of go around and just closing thoughts from everybody. Take a minute or two.
Yeah, closing thoughts. I know that providing a little bit of guidance on some of the security things that we just talked about. I'll own a draft of that. I did have the beginning of my blog, iamawatchman.substack.com, where I talked about AI intrusion. And what I'll see if I could do is update best practices for this stuff, given what we talked about on this live stream. And give me a couple weeks probably to pull that together, and that will be helpful for people. I do not, want to inject fear. This is much more about trying to be as smart as we can, given that things are changing very quickly today. And also, I just want to highlight that Gary Albin and I are co-authoring a book called, we just named it, it's called A Creed of Saints. It is book 6 in the Dax Hunter files. And if people are interested in, amazing suspense, action, thriller, some political intrigue, military stuff in there. And increasingly, as Gary has matured as a believer, and we are working together now on book 6. We're incorporating a lot of advanced technology and eschatology in this. Book 5, A Crisis of Faith, ended at the rapture, just to tell you. And book 6 begins 23 minutes after the rapture and goes on to the signing of the peace covenant. And so we are very, very focused on trying to help people. There's 2 main goals that we have. One is we want to help people understand in a narrative, engaging and page-turning type of way what is actually happening in the world. So we're basically being watchmen through narrative. And Gary is especially strong at a category called faction, which combines fact with fiction in order to base a lot of the character development and story arc and the things that you see, the intrigue, in reality of what people can actually verify through history. And we're really excited about that launch. In fact, Britt, thank you again for hosting a live stream in which Gary gave his testimony, and you could see that on Britt's channel. So I have a debt of gratitude for you, Britt, to help us begin to bring a little more visibility to this amazing work. Our release date for this is going to be May 28th, so stay tuned for that. And Gary can be found at garyalban.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And then let's go to David. And by the way, if you want to share something like Scott did about things you got coming up, where people can find you, so we'll do David. David.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. Well, thanks for everybody watching tonight. Hope you enjoyed that. In order to follow what we do, it's interpretingthetimes.com. So Interpreting the Times is our ministry. But John, I wanted to end with something. It's not about technology, but every so often a story comes across and you see it, and it just it shocks you at the same time. And I shake my head over it. But the Jerusalem Post just put out 2 days ago, and then the New York Post also redid it, about a gay pride coming up in the Dead Sea. And it's called Pride Land. It's going to be a 4-day festival, June 1st to June 4th. They're taking over hotels, taking over the whole area of the Dead Sea. They're having what they're calling, quote, a family-friendly area for children's activities. And it's going to be things going 24/7 around the clock. The whole thing is nothing but gay pride at the Dead Sea. And when I read this article and saw this happening, this announcement, I thought, what happened with Sodom and Gomorrah and the activity that took place on that territory? And now we're going back all these years later, and we're coming back and doing it again. It was just kind of mind-boggling to me. So just want to make people aware of that.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do Britt, then Tom, and Patrick.
Sure. Yeah, I think, we talked about a lot of daunting subjects tonight. And I think, something Tom said is something that we should all be focused on, is not these things themselves, but what they point to. And they point to the hope we have in Jesus Christ. And I want to read this verse right here from John 16, verse 33. It's Jesus speaking, and he says, I've told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart, because I have overcome the world. So guys, we have hope in Jesus. All of these terrible things we see happening right now, terrible things that are coming, we have hope, and the Bible has told us these things ahead of time so that we can know how near we are to the return of Christ. And that should just fill us with joy as believers, but it should also fill us with a sense of urgency of how important it is to go out and share the good news of Jesus Christ with as many people as possible. So don't let any of this bring you down. Instead, let it lift you up and fill you with joy. But at the same time, we've got a lot of work to do in being ambassadors for Christ in a lost and dying world.
Thanks, Britt. Tom?
Amen. I couldn't help but think of what Dave was commenting on with the Dead Sea. Dave, I was looking at that earlier today and thinking, man, what what comes around goes around. It was here at the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, like you said. It's just another evidence of the days that we live in.
Yep.
And I was thinking the same thing Britt was also when Jesus came the first time, or when Jesus was talking about himself going to the cross, he told his disciples, I'm going to be turned over to the Romans. I'm going to be put into the grave, but I'm going to raise again also. And he said, I've told you these things beforehand. Well, why? So they wouldn't be afraid. But what happened? The disciples were afraid when it happened. And all of the discourse when he's telling them, he gave us all of the different signs of the second coming. Again, he said, see, I have told you these things beforehand. And we don't want to be afraid. We can't. He doesn't want us to be afraid. That's why he told us, this is what you look for. But they point to me, and I think of Jesus' words in Luke 21, verse 28. When you see these things begin to take place, not when they're fulfilled, but when you see them begin to take place, look up. And as Britt said, Jesus himself said, lift up your head because your redemption draws near. In other words, with expectant joy because our redemption draws near.
Thanks, Tom. Patrick.
Oh, amen. Thank you. I want to encourage everybody to go to technocracy.news and check out my latest book and the last book as well before that. The Lord is just opening up so many avenues of research and stuff that I never saw before. And it's an amazing story. We see this thing happening in the Middle East. How many years have we judged Bible prophecy based on things that are happening in Israel itself, right? And Jerusalem? Well, yeah, that's obviously that's appropriate. But now we see not necessarily the political thing in Israel, but all of this stuff, economic wrapper that's being wrapped around Israel, the Gulf states, etc. This is an amazing story, in my opinion. So take advantage of that, of my books, and you can get them all on Amazon.com as well. We're working on the audiobook for this new book, the new economics of technocracy. So I won't bore you with a mini sermon. I'm tempted, but I think Britt already brought up the point. We are ambassadors for Christ. This is our mission. I think everybody said this at some point. We're ambassadors for Christ. We should act like it.
Agree. Thanks. I want to thank all the guys for joining us tonight. Time flies by very, very quickly on these things. We'll do it again in about 4 weeks. We'll try to do question and answer. So you might start gathering your things. I do have a bunch of questions that I've kind of collecting. And interestingly enough, somebody went to some of the AI chatbots and they had questions for us tonight. We'll maybe share those in the future. They are aware of the AI large language model things, are aware of what we've been doing here for a while. And I've got let's see, Tom, you and I are going to be doing a conference in Ohio here in July, last weekend in July. Go there for a conference. Olivier and Carl Techrib, and I think Gary Gilbert is coming to that one as well, Mike Spalding. And then I'm going to be out in Washington with Olivier in August. Olivier's going to be here at the FPC the last Sunday in July. And this is just kind of a humorous story. Brandon Holthouse asked me to cover. I think you and Brandon and Tom are doing a conference in someplace in September, and he said, "Hey, would you come out and preach the morning services on Sunday, September 13th?" And I looked at the calendar, and that's the Feast of Trumpets. So I wrote to Brandon, and I said, "Are you thinking you're getting raptured, and I'll be able to cover your your service that Sunday?" So. I'll be left behind. And it was a joke. It's a little Bible prophecy joke. So, but anyway, follow us where you can. And we do appreciate you taking the time. Share, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And we will see you in a few weeks. Thanks. Good night.